Hey all, welcome to my channel. Please subscribe if you want to subscribe. Leave any feedbacks or any comments in the or questions in the comment section. I do read my comments. I try to respond to them to the best of my ability, especially when I get notified. I'll be honest. A few videos ago that I posted, there was a comment placed, but I was never notified. I just happened to like seen it through Creator Studio at that point. I mean, honestly, the app doesn't notify me. I don't get emails, I guess, until much later, anyways. But I was able to respond to it anyways. So if I do see a comment and I don't see it and I don't respond to it, just pretend that I never got a chance to see it because I never got notified about it unless I just happen to randomly seen it. Anyways, but I do read my comments and I try to respond to the best of my abilities. Anyway, to the best of my abilities. Anyways, I want to do a little bit slight off topic. Well, not off topic. It's not a rant, but more of a review, basically. I recently read a book by Henry Bushkin, basically an unauthorized biography or his account of Johnny Carson, basically, when he was working for him as being his, well, one, his lawyer, but also his wingman and fixer, and probably sort of confidant, I guess. From 62 to 1992, I think. Yeah, to 1992, essentially, or 1993, 94, based on the book itself. The book itself, I mean, I knew, it was well known in the industry that Johnny Carson did have a temper, and like he would do a complete 180 very quickly on the drop of a dime, on a drop of a bucket, basically. Just go from like funny, jovial person to temperamental and like nasty. I've never witnessed it myself firsthand, so I don't know. But it was well documented out there. When I mean documented, of course, like written about it, basically. Other aspects was as well too is like the fact that Johnny Carson did have an eye for the ladies, even while married 3 times. I don't know about his third marriage, but the other two, 4 times actually. I'm sorry. The other 3 times, it was known that he was in pretty much there was infidelity involved. But it also showed how he became a very powerful, rich entertainer in the industry, basically. But the book itself was pretty good, and it was a little insightful. I mean, first-hand accounts from Henry Bushkin, which, if being his close confidant, that a lot of people in the industry knew that Bushkin was basically like his right-hand man, practically. Everyone would say Ed McMahon. No, it's actually Bushkin. Anyways, the book itself was pretty insightful, as I would say. I actually enjoyed reading the book, and I actually looking at or reading some of the exploits that Carson did, as well as how Carson was funny. There were some jokes in there that was like really funny. I actually found it very hilarious. I'm not gonna say spoil it here, but like there's some funny jokes in there, basically, that Carson, and it still holds relevant today too, I think. But in any case, I think this case, I don't know who would say, but like someone probably say that this is a book, an ode to Johnny. I don't think it is. It's more of a case. It looks like this book is more of a case of framing it to basically giving not another perspective, but redeeming Bushkin himself. I mean, there was always a falling out with Bushkin and Carson. And I think Bushkin, basically never got his chance to tell the story, but it's basically him narrating basically he's narrating the story in the situation to the point of his point of view. So it seems like it's more of trying to him redeem himself and make himself look good in front of everyone else. And like there might be some aspects. I mean, yeah, there are some aspects where he genuinely shows that he was remorseful about his infidelity. But it seems like he was pushing the narrative, the fact that like of him being infidel, being unfaithful, but also at the same time neglecting his family. He was pushing it on Johnny. Honestly, that was something on him, basically, to be quite honest. Yeah, Carson was his number one primary client in a ways, or not his primary, but his number one client. But he had the opportunities here and there to do whatever it is, and it seems like this was more of the book itself, from my perspective, seemed like a blame game more than anything else to Johnny Carson. And then Bushkin was trying to relieve himself from all aspects of this was not my fault. Everything that was done was not my fault. Everything that was said about me was untrue. In reality, I don't know. I mean, there's like always 2 sides to a story, basically. But at least there are some aspects of the book itself, basically, where, again, some of the jokes that Johnny said and some of the things that had occurred. And, like, as far as the deals that were done. I mean, it was also a case where like it was trying to hype up Bushkin himself as far as what he did for Johnny, as far as making him the richest entertainer out there. And reality is that if that's true, fine, so be it. But there's always two sides to the story as well too. It seems as though he's basically saying, "Oh yeah, like this, giant Carson's prior manager pretty much bilked him for everything he could, and like basically, swindled Johnny." And this guy Bushkin basically came in, seeing all this, told Johnny, he's like, and basically restructured everything for Johnny specifically, without him getting a piece of the pie. In reality, I don't think that's entirely true. I think it's more of a case of like Bushkin probably put something here and there basically at that point. I mean, it was a case where like I think Bushkin, of course, being him, being genuine and like wanting to care about Johnny and helping out Johnny in the early on days, that he was trying to help him out. I mean, as time progressed, I think it was more of a case where like there were cases where like Bushkin himself, as every person is, they want a piece of the pie, they want something in return, they want a larger piece, they want to become famous as well too. So let's not forget that. So I mean, we're not gonna like basically give Bushkin a pass based on his book, but like I said, I think some of the insights of some of the exploits, there are some insights into some of the exploits that Johnny did basically, which was really, I found quite fascinating. But of course, some of the jokes that were there were pretty funny as well too, and I thought it was hilarious. To be quite honest, I was like laughing here and there. And I thought, I was like, oh, maybe I could like use that somewhere. But in reality, it's like probably been said so many times that that chances are I probably even heard it too, and I thought it was funny and just found it funny again at this point. But if I had to say, if you could buy the book, I would say buy the book. But for me, I didn't really buy the book. I was just using it through Prime Reading, Amazon Prime Reading. Basically, it's like that whole aspect where, like a library thing, you can take out a book because you're part of Prime. You can take the book, read it, and then once you're done, just return it back, just like a library. It's something like a library essentially, and that's what it was. It was pretty good. I kind of liked it, so that's why I didn't want to buy the book basically, because the fact is like, this is Bushkin basically trying to essentially, or at least at the time when it was published, basically, I mean, it was published in 2014. I don't know if he's alive or not right now, to be honest, but trying to make a money, quick. I don't want to say quick buck off, using Carson's name, but that's what it seemed like basically at this point. And I think that's where a lot of these books are as well too. Like they try to make a quick buck off for someone, like being the right hand man or right hand person, wingman, etc. Basically, or lawyer, whatever it may be. So I mean, the book was like published in 2014, of course. So I don't know, again, like if Bushkin's alive or not. I mean, chances are most likely he is. I think because I think he'd probably be like 80 something right now, if I'm doing my math correctly, and if I remember correctly as well too. But I mean, some of the stuff. I mean, it's some of the stuff that occurred in the 70s, 60s. But more specifically in the 70s was really funny. And some of the stuff that Johnny would say was really funny as well, too. And, like, it was pretty interesting to hear that Carson did not want to do the inaugural ball for Ronald Reagan, which was really surprising. To the point where it makes sense. It was, a favor to Frank Sinatra. Sinatra being Sinatra, you do a guy a favor, basically. And, like, remember, Sinatra, Carson, Gleason, Brando, there were quite a few entertainers back in those days that were really powerful, and like and Milton Berle, like Carson, Milton Berle, and Sinatra were definitely the three well-known, popular, powerful entertainers that were out there at that time. But it's great to know that it was actually Carson, to find out actually as well too, that Carson was the one that actually I don't want to say discovered Letterman, but pushed for Letterman for the Late Show. Basically, the fact that Carson hated the Late Night Show, basically, not the Late, the Late Show, basically, where Carson didn't want Time Snyder. He thought Time Snyder was like kind of a hack, like Don Rickles was a hack, etc. Basically, that he thought Letterman should be the one that follow him, basically, and like he had a say into that, and then he gave Letterman, and I think Letterman already knows that, and like it was a case where like with Carson leaving, I think Carson would have known that. Had he known what it was, I think he would have had final say on, David Letterman. But the fact that he retired and he was going to retire, he didn't have the final say ultimately, which was kind of surprising because the way it seems like the deal was structured when he was with NBC, it seems like he would always have final say and everything. So I think it's a case where like it's a possibility that he pretty much, I think, gave Leno the shot instead of Letterman, to be quite honest. But I could be wrong. That could be that's pure conjecture on my part. I mean, honestly, because like based on the deal that I read in the book, Carson was powerful enough that he would have been able to name his successor at that point. And I'm surprised he didn't name Letterman. And the fact that everyone's saying, "Oh no, it was NBC," I had a feeling that Johnny had a heart, a hand on it at that point. And at the same time, it was pretty funny also at the same time where, with Joan Collins, um, I think, the fact of the portrayal part, it wasn't the fact that he was betrayed that Joan Collins went to Fox. I think it was the fact that Joan Collins was on the show and, or, even prior to that, she never bothered to ask Johnny, like, hey, Johnny, I'm going to compete against you. You cool with that? And it sounds like Johnny would have been great with it because Bushkin himself is even saying, like, knowing Johnny well enough at that point, you probably would have known that Johnny would have, like, just given her the okay. It's like, yeah, go for it. I understand. Because, like, seeing where you're at, there's no way you're going to get the Tonight Show, unfortunately. And, like, a woman in late night comedy, late night TV talk show, it makes absolute sense for you to go to Fox, and I give you permission to go ahead and compete with me. I don't think Carson would have cared. Carson didn't care, to be honest, because like he always had the ratings, and there was no one else competing against him. Even Ted Koppel like knew full well, like ABC would never have done anything to be able to compete with them. I think that was a whole interesting aspect as well. I think even Joan Rivers basically, I said Joan Collins, sorry, I meant Joan Rivers. Joan Rivers even admits it too as well, to like, Johnny felt betrayed, and like I think she even realized, like, had she told him and asked him, but in reality the question is like, why do you need to ask permission? I think it's more of a case because Johnny, above all else, respected loyalty and expected loyalty as well too. It sounded like, Joan Rivers was very loyal to him, up to her perspective, to the point like she had to look for number one as well too, to be quite honest. So I think if Johnny was still alive today, I think he probably would have realized it and probably would have forgiven her at this point, to be quite honest. I mean, before both of them passed away, respectfully. But I think, given time, it would have, like, opened up stuff, and like he would have, forgiven her at that point. But like I said, Carson being Carson, the great Carson he is, and he was funny. I will admit that. I mean, it's amazing, the book itself. It prompts me to want to basically look at some other biographies of Carson as well too, and read some biographies of Carson, and getting other multiple perspectives as well too, to be quite honest. But I would say if you want, this would be a good starter point, Bushkin's book, if you want to get some insight into Carson himself. I mean, you'll have to read between the lines and ignore certain parts of what Bushkin was trying to do. But like I said, this is more of a case where, like, it seems like this book was more of a case where, like, to essentially make Bushkin guilt free and explain, not explain his side of the story, but more of like make him look good. Let him change the narrative about himself. Basically, I think that's what this book was basically more about, more than anything else. So with that, I'd leave it at that. Let me know if any of you guys read the book. If you have, great. Let me know what your thoughts on it. If you haven't, I suggest you do. And with that, I leave it at that. Unfiltered, unedited, and unrehearsed. Until next time.